Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast, brought to you by Marketing What's New. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today, we're getting a tour of the work that is done by those in product marketing jobs. First, let me please remind you as a PSA that Universal Analytics, or UA, is going to be sunsetted June 30th of 2023. You want to make sure that you've got adequate resources and time with the GA4 product replacing it so that you can test them in parallel. All right, let's go to today's show. This episode is the first in a series on product marketing. And in my opinion, this is one of the toughest roles someone can have in a company. As its two-word name suggests, it sits in a no man's land between other well-entrenched corporate functions, product development and marketing. Yet, to get external clients to fall in love with what you make, you've got to have a good person in the product marketing role. As squishy as the concept of love is, it's what today's guest chose as a theme for her book on product marketing, called Loved, which came out in 2022. She is the product marketing partner at Silicon Valley Product Group and a partner at Costanoa Ventures, a boutique early-stage venture capital firm. Those positions combined have her advising Fortune 500 companies down to early-stage startups on product marketing. Her writing has been featured in TechCrunch and VentureBeat. Prior to this, she worked at Microsoft and Netscape, and she also received a bachelor's and a master's degree from Stanford. She lives in San Francisco with her husband and two kids and lectures at nearby Berkeley in their engineering graduate program. Let's go talk with Martina Lauchengco. I am very pleased to welcome Martina Lauchengco. Welcome to the show, Martina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you please tell me the name of this book that you've come out with?
It is called Loved: How to Rethink Marketing Tech Products.
Yeah, and it covers a great topic. The need for it, I think, is more than ever because you can pull any set of headlines from the press and find a copy, find an example of a product which has disrupted an existing industry or a product that was once great and has now fallen into obsolescence. And products have this kind of life cycle, right? It's a constantly moving theater of products.
Yes. And I think beyond the fact that it's a constantly shifting theater, it's that the quantity of products and companies that are entering every category has never been greater. We're in this economic downturn, but up to now, like last year, there were 500 new developer tool startups funded in 1 year. And there are 5.5 million apps already in app stores. And even if there is some culling and some companies don't make it, there will still be more than anyone could ever process in every single category. And I think people have not quite absorbed how much cognitive load that is putting on them to process. And it is incumbent on the technology industry to realize, like, you're now like a supermarket product in the aisle. There's that much competition. There's that much else for people to look at that is confusing, overlapping, and you have to think about it from the market's perspective.
There's a tremendous amount of noise, and buyers are really struggling to try to solve their problems. And yet, like you say, there are products out there, and we have to assume that they're smart and people that are building them, and that there are smart investors that are funding them. So we have to figure out how these two are going to meet. I'm going to come back to that one thing that you said about how when there are new products entering, we might think that the answer is just to throw more at it, right? I mean, if the most recent launches are any indication, that seems to be what the tech world says is, just pour on more products. When they are finding that they're competing, sometimes they'll say, well, let's make a new category for a product. Can you tell me why you think either of those are
a bad idea and why they might steer those companies towards those shoals of obsolescence I've talked about?
Yeah. Well, I think what you just described is what a lot of people's reflex is. I want the world to know about me, so let me just turn everything I want to say up to 11. Or there are a lot of competitors that are doing something similar, so I just have to say something different and it will be understood that I am different. And I think what the modern world is requiring of us is to be far more strategic about how we think about our markets and leveraging specifically our go-to-market for what it might be able to give us as an advantage. For example, product-led growth versus classic direct sales. One's top down and one's bottoms up. If you are bottoms up, your messaging is going to have to be very centered on what the individual user who's experiencing that product is finding beneficial. You're not messaging to the economic buyer, you're messaging to the user. However, if you are top down, you are trying to penetrate an account, which means you need to have all of those things into account in your messaging at the right time with the right part of the sales cycle. So it might be as much your sales process and the customer journey you've identified as it is any individual message. And so each of these things has to take into account the market and the go-to-market. And that then determines what's the right strategy and what's the right message. If people don't take the time to think through those things, you can imagine, oh, let's just say what we want to say and turn it to 11. It's going to fall on dead ears.
Yeah. There's a great example. You start fairly early on in the book, and you give the example of a startup which was trying to take on a very well set up company. And this was in the category of saving web pages so that they could be looked at later.
Yeah.
And the large incumbent was one called Instapaper. And the upstart looked at them and realized, we cannot beat them on features. We have a CEO who's very passionate, but we are at a loss for how we're going to make ourselves heard against this large rival who seems to be getting all the attention. Can you just take us through in that one instance what that company did to try to identify with the audience that was going to eventually make them grow?
Yeah. So that's the story of Pocket. And what was so interesting about those two companies is they started off solving the same problem within 6 months of one another. And they had fairly proximate feature sets. And one of them had 3.5 million users and the other only had 1 million. And the one that was talked about the most was the one that only had 1 million users. And so Pocket, basically the CEO of Pocket, was looking at that saying, why is the other guy getting all the attention and why am I being compared to him? There's no feature advantage. They're more expensive than us. We have more users. But it was because the founder basically was one of those Silicon Valley folks and had his own podcast before podcasts were a thing. So he had a platform that made him appear to the market to be saying something and have it produce something of worth. And so the shift that Pocket made was realizing it's not enough for us to have a product that is superior or used by more people. We must prepare the market for why our approach makes more sense and why it's actually shifting behavior so that people recognize that the category itself is important. And this isn't just some rinky-dink app that other people might do, that it counts in terms of enabling the new modern multi-device mobile lifestyle. And so that big shift that they made was instead of just producing more product and more features, they spent time telling the world about how people were using Save for Later to watch long-form videos and how people were using things on multiple devices, on their iPads, as well as their phones, as well as their computers. So having multi-device support, which of course is one of their advantages, was important. So they prepared the market for how they were approaching and solving the problem so that when push came to shove and when they relaunched his Pocket from Read It Later and they had an all new version that had all the support for things that Instapaper did not, the world could see why it mattered and see why this was better. And they never looked back. And it was never even close after that. But it took that concerted effort to prepare the market to understand why this approach was better.
Yeah, on a personal level, I'm a Pocket user, and I can barely even remember the other company. It took your book to remind me. So I guess there's your proof point. But you're right. They found the market context, and that was that people are moving beyond a single device, that we have multi-device users who are, as part of their creative process, both taking in stuff and then either sharing it or using it in what they create. There are so many shifts that are happening at the buyer, and it was at that particular time that the product was the right fit for what those people needed.
Yeah. And Glenn, you'd asked a really important question, which is around category and establishing the category. And is that an important thing to do? There was no established save for later category. And it wasn't like it was going to be covered by analysts they were a productivity app. It's not its own quote unquote category. And what I like to encourage people to do is you must drive the conversation within your category. It's not that it's more obvious for B2B companies that you might be in an existing category. But for many of you, you're redrawing the lines around where that category exists, or you're overlapping now with other things. The leading and defining the category is an important part of the mix. But I think people have an outmoded notion of what that means. You must drive the conversations that let you be seen as the best solution. It also includes driving how people assess the category and how they're looking at it. But it's not, here's the category, thereby we are the winners of it. I think that's old. That doesn't work anymore because there are just too many players and too many overlapping categories for that to be the easy way to win.
And you point out that there are so many companies that are now billion-dollar plus that didn't go that route. They simply took an existing category and found a way to become the leader at that.
100%. Like if you look at the vast majority of who we consider tech giants, like Netflix created their own category, AWS and Amazon created their own categories, but Google, Facebook, all of these giants, they were not the first. They just built things better, smarter, had network effects. They had a pure focus. I worked with the Google team in the very earliest days where they were trying to make the decision, because literally everyone else that was a search engine at that time was a portal, and they were becoming media companies and doing original content and had all these channels. And it was just, how much more can we pile into this? And search was barely important. And Google made the explicit decision. We think there's room to be exceptional at search, and that the world needs that because the amount of information that is growing is exponential every year. People will need pure search to be excellent. And they just made that their focus. That was counterintuitive thinking at that moment in time. The entire market was doing something different. They picked the right thing.
For sure. If we look at any one of those tech giants, we're going to see that they have a vast majority of people in engineering roles. And I think we need to address this, because for those listening who work in a product-based company, odds are that there's a large culture of people who day in, day out make the product. And we need them. But if we can maybe bring down the cone of silence here for a moment to the marketers listening, let's talk about the interplay that a product marketer has from the product manager over on the engineering side. You yourself, in writing this book and in bringing it from your previous book in the series, are arguing that it is the product marketing manager that, in tandem with a product manager, they are the dynamic duo that most companies need to pull this off, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the product marketer can't be effective at what they do without being like really married to the product manager that helps them understand, why are we building what we build? When is it coming out? What's the market thinking behind that? And the two-way conversation that's so essential is that the market helps inform how the product teams are making decisions. They have direct contact with customers a lot, but they might not understand, hey, we're just getting hammered by this competitor that is absolutely hammering us in this one product area. What can we do? And the product, if a pure product forward way of responding to that might be, well, we're addressing that and it's going to be done in the next 2 sprints, but that's going to be 2 quarters from now. So well, there's nothing I can do about it response would be, okay, well, then we'll market it when it's ready. But the dynamic duo version of this is, okay, well, how can we use what we have and frame it so that it is at least preparing the world for where we want to go, or we look like we made this choice on purpose because we believe that there's an advantage to it. And how do we articulate that advantage? And then is that marketed, or is it brought into a sales process? Because maybe you don't want to market the fact that you don't have this cool thing. And maybe you only want it to be introduced in the sales process where someone's asking you if you have it. That's the product marketer making that decision, saying, where does this belong? Where does it live in the hierarchy? Where does it live in our customer's journey? And there's no product manager that can or should know that. And someone in sales is just busy trying to sell the product. And so it's that product marketer that is trying to draw all those bridges between those go-to-market worlds and what's being built in product.
Mm-hmm. There are cases like that where you said where that feature isn't quite ready. But what I appreciated about it was that if the product has been made to serve a certain market, even with a highly skilled product manager, it might just sit there. They have basically brought the product to the market, and we need the product marketer to bring the market to the product.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes to activate those things that people don't even realize, oh, yeah, this could work for us. You've got a background with Microsoft, and you did give some examples where there was a feature that was either many levels deep and it didn't readily appear to a certain vertical to be the thing that they would use, or that it was something that you lacked and the vertical might have been demanding it, but you had to play for time, like you say. So the effort here has to be not only in the here and now, but we have to have a little bit of a roadmap mindset to it as well, right?
Yeah. Well, the example that you talked about there was when Word was trying to tackle the legal market. We were the category leader. So we had like more than 50 to 60% market share overall, but we were not the market leader in the legal category, which is of course the day in, day out bread and butter user of a word processor. And so we knew that was an important vertical for us to capture. And it turns out there's a very specific way in which sub-bulleting in legal briefs must be done for them to turn in these legal briefs. And there are no exceptions because it's a legal requirement. So you had to know how to hack your way to it for Word to be able to do it, which most users aren't.
Right.
And so we're like, okay, for us to be able to do it exactly the way they need, we actually have to rewrite the entire layout engine in Word, which of course is a huge undertaking and was not something that we could just spit out very easily. So we had to say, okay, what we have right now, who does it serve? It serves a more advanced user. It serves someone who likes the rest of Office, so might be using spreadsheets to do calculations or create charts, or PowerPoint to actually use in trial scenarios where they're trying to be more dynamic. And so they were more advanced users or larger firms that could take on the benefits of the rest of Office and not just these very specific things inside of Word. So we had to make what we had work for the market that we had in front of us. So let's just target the firms that have more sophisticated users and use all of Office. And then when we have that layout engine and the legal briefs and the sub bullets working exactly as they need, then we can just slay at every aspect of the legal market, from the sole practitioner to the firms that have less sophisticated IT departments. And so that's how we managed what we had in the product with the market that we had, and then how we managed toward where we wanted to go.
Very well put. And you show there how, even though there is a matter of digging deep to understand what the single requirement is, we don't always have to come back with that knee-jerk reflex of, okay, well, drop everything and build it into the product right now. You use a broader set of solutions. And a marketer is going to be able to bring that out. I can't think of another role that is going to see that. And the way that you put it in the book is you say the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I love that. That to me is what emblemizes a good product marketer.
Yes. And I'd say that there are so many examples, and I bring a lot into the book of where it was a pure market response. Like there's nothing to do in the product. It's really identifying what can we do to respond to this in market? How do we reposition relative to this? Or there might be a competitor that just changed their sales process, no change in product, and it started doubling the amount of throughput. This is a true story. Double the win rate just by changing sales process. There's nothing to change in product. That is all go-to-market facing stuff. And so this is why there's so much that must be done purely on the go-to-market side to make sure that you're adapting to what the market is requiring of you to compete and for your product to be recognized and to win.
We're recording this in the middle of 2022. We have had a 2-year time period where it's never been more true that you need to consider all avenues of how you might change. Even you suggest in the book, just being a thoughtful marketer, just being someone who has your user base's best interests at heart. If you can do nothing else, let's say you're handcuffed with the product management team, you can at least do things. Maybe it's retweaking a sales process. Maybe it's tweaking how your customer success group works with them. But there is always something you can do, right?
There's always something you can do. And the other thing that a lot of people turn to in times like this and say like, hey, let's assume our product is static for a year. We got nothing. Everything we do has to be on the market facing side. Fully integrated campaigns that just provide genuine value to people. And this is classic marketing that pure marketers should live and breathe and love. But again, it's not purely promotional. Hey, buy this. It's what value can we add to the people that we're trying to reach? And that's that's always what elevates and distinguishes those that stand out from everyone else who is just trying to promote themselves. I give a lot of examples in my social channels of I call them marketing x-rays where I'm like, this is great. And here's why it's great. And here's something that's less good. It's much more traditional and less sophisticated in its approach and unpack why. But challenging marketing times require marketers to aspire to that next level. How do we really make what we have to say valuable to the people we want to be meaningful to? And you start there, and then you figure out how to layer your product and whatever your agenda is on top of that.
We're going to shift in a second into some of those positioning examples, but we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come right back.
I'm taking a moment to talk about the soon-to-be retired Google Universal Analytics, or UA, which affects almost every marketer with a website. Anyone who's seen it can tell that the new Google Analytics product is missing a lot of UA reports. You may think you're stuck using the GA4 interface to make them, but there's another way Google is giving you your data. They provide access to it as raw data in Google Cloud, and once in there, it can feed reports and even be merged with your other marketing data in a dashboard. You'll be able to show your company the impact that marketing has on revenue and profit. You know your data best. That's why you're the best person to set this up. But you don't have to do it alone. I've reduced the process down to something marketers can do inside of a 2-day workshop. Whether you've installed Google Analytics 4 or not, this will fully migrate all of your old UA settings and get you implemented on Google's stack of database and dashboard tools. In early 2023, the in-person GA Fast Forward workshops will happen in Ottawa, Kingston, Montreal, as well as across upstate New York and Vermont. You can go now and see registration details or get notified when it's happening in your area. Just go to gafastforward.com, spelled as you'd say it, or GAFast, the number 4, then WARD. Let's get back to the conversation.
We're back, and Martina, you've been excellent at describing for us how a product marketer can really apply themselves to this role. Let's tackle perhaps the biggest chunk of what someone who is looking after the marketing of a product has to do, which is to try and find the positioning here. Positioning is difficult because if we look at, and you cover this from so many angles in the book, but if I only were to take the angle of startup to SMB to enterprise, and along that continuum, my goodness, the number of people who think that they have something to say about positioning, it's wide. In the case of a startup, you have the CEO themselves who's probably wearing that hat. But let's take maybe the small to mid-size situation where a product marketer is going to be stepping in. You start with, well, in one section that I remember, there was a cautionary tale of a product marketer who was fairly junior, and they were brought into a huddle. I believe the company
Yes.
had been losing some head-to-heads against competitors, and it seemed that all the high-powered people in the room had an opinion on what their positioning was, and that the product marketer tried to sow what those different parties were saying into something of a collage to try and make everybody happy. Can you tell us how that went?
Yes. So it was a head of product, head of sales, head of marketing, and lots of other voices. And everyone had slightly different points of view of what it should be. And then the product marketer said, well, I'll try and include all of them so that everybody sees the thing that makes them happy in the sales deck. And of course, then it's this complete mishmash that doesn't own a position, doesn't clearly articulate. It says everything, which means it says nothing. And it does not clearly distinguish itself from everything else that's in the category. It's kind of like competitor X clearly articulates themselves. And then if you're competitor Y and you kitchen sink it and you're everything that everyone else is saying, not helpful. So the best approach, especially if you find yourself in that position where everyone's saying, gosh, we have to respond. This competitor is cleaning our clock. What do we say? Instead of just going around and trying to make everyone happy, listen to all of that input, understand what the advantage, the strengths are that need to be leveraged, but really listen to what the market says you need to do. And that's the product marketer's job, is to pressure test and understand, what am I hearing from this market? How do I take all these inputs and find a way to articulate what's most meaningful to hear? And then, super important, is you have sales run some discovery with this. See if it's working. See if people are leaning in. Is it actually achieving its intended outcome? And what failed in that, we'll call it the collage process, was everyone inside the company said, yes, I see what I like. Therefore, it is approved by me. And they didn't let the process drive whether or not they approved the outcome. So they said, it all looks good. Now roll it out to sales. And then sales took it. And of course, like, nobody liked it. No one was using it very well. So you want to take all that input, come up with an MVP, just like a product process, have a couple people in sales, trial it, get feedback. Were you leaning in? Was this clear? Did people ask questions? What were the questions that were being asked? And then adapt it based on those discovery meetings so that what you come out with actually achieves a specific outcome, not just that you said what you wanted to say. That's the part that gets missed. You're looking for the asset to create an outcome.
And even a junior marketer can get out in front with sales, maybe ride-alongs or on-calls. And though they may not have the seniority of those other people, they are close enough that they can hear what the market is saying. They can find out what is familiar. And you make an important point that people start with what's familiar before they move to what's new.
Yeah.
And you can have these people in a room who, because they live and breathe the product every day, may accurately describe it, but they've missed the point that it's not tethered to anything that the existing marketplace knows. And even a lowly marketer can go and find that out and then bring it back. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you've baked this into a process and even a canvas?
You bet. So just on a discovery process basis, so I'm actually working with a company right now where so they do modern enterprise authorization, which probably means very little to most of your audience. So, and that's what they were finding. Now it is adjacent to all these other categories of things that happen. Authentication, privileged access management. There were all these existing things. And so when they went out doing their customer discovery work as a product team, they would ask, here's what we do, the problems we're trying to solve. How would you describe, or they would test, We talk about it as being privileged access management. And then they would hear back what the questions were. And with something like PAM, privileged access management, it wound up being this third rail that sent people down this rabbit hole of all the wrong things to compare them to. And they kept finding that in these discovery conversations. Everything that exists, that's category language and jargon, puts people down a rabbit hole that we don't want to be associated with. And so we actually can't use that language. But if we describe exactly what we are trying to do, the problem we're trying to solve, hey, you have a customer success rep that is trying to change some customer data and needs access to this customer data in this one instance to resolve a ticket, go in there and resolve it and then exit, but not have permanent access to that valuable customer data. That's just-in-time access management. And when you described it that way, people completely understood what the problem was, what the solution was, and what they were doing that was not novel, human readable policies. And that would begin the right conversation instead of saying, oh, and by the way, this is authorization that's modern and next level and blah, blah, blah. Because that was just too much of a leap, even for people who were experts. So in their discovery process, they realized the familiar terms actually move people in the wrong direction. And we just have to be better at describing the use case and the problem that we're solving in more ordinary terms. And then everybody gets it. And everyone says, I want to talk to you. I can use this today. So the process itself determines how much existing language you use versus novel or maybe just more simple language to describe what you do. And that process of customer discovery, testing, getting feedback, that is what helps you determine what you should put in a framework or a canvas that you can then use in other places.
Very well put. And I suppose this is consolation to people who are getting overwhelmed with the thought of setting this positioning. Where I found it very grounded was when you just said, it's a story. And just like that example you gave, it is tying together things that people already know. It is using simple language, and it not only will help cement that one, but most of us are in a B2B context. Let's not forget that we're trying to create evangelists. We're trying to find people in those buying organizations who have to run to the other 4.3 people that are on a buying committee and explain why our product should be chosen. That's
such an important point, Glenn, which is in tech, we have this tendency to like jargon and like technical terms because we know exactly what we mean. And we presume everyone else knows exactly what we mean if we use the same term. But that is just totally not true, even among experts. And so if we use simple but evocative language, like how would you describe this to an 8th grader? When I was writing my book, a lot of how I chose the final language in my book was Malcolm Gladwell gives this fantastic advice in his masterclass. Yes, I'm an evangelist because I found it to be so helpful. He said, right at the level of an 8th grader, you can still have very sophisticated concepts and sentences that convey your sophistication. But in general, for someone to not feel like they're reading a textbook, you need to just level it out at about 8th grade. And it made me think, I had a 14-year-old that was an 8th grader while I was writing this. And so I said, how would I describe this to my child in a way that would make it simple for them to understand?
That can be a superpower. I mean, you mentioned 3 other fundamentals that a product marketer has, but that storytelling one is, well, there's no equivalent to it over in the product management and engineering side.
That's right.
And we have to remember, I mean, God bless them. They do important work, but theirs is all about getting deeper and deeper and not getting simpler and simpler. So this is where we need to double down on getting that simple message across for all the reasons that we need, not to take away from how the thing actually works under the hood. That's super impressive, but that's not what's going to be important in a customer journey. And that's what we're charged with doing.
And that is ultimately how the success of a product gets measured. Not, was this the greatest thing ever? Was it adopted and was it valued by the people you were trying to make it valuable to? And we always believe that's obvious to the market, but it isn't. And so that's why the 4 fundamentals, why I have them as 4 and why they're ordinal. Number 1 is to the ambassador, to customer market insights, to connect those, because you need those to be able to do all the rest of your job. So you can't even pass go if you don't have that first fundamental in place. The second fundamental is being a strategist, which is directing that product's go-to-market. That's some of the stuff we talked about earlier, which is your go-to-market matters. That shapes how you're messaging and shapes and who your audience is, and all those things really shape the plan. And the plan should be extremely thoughtful, because that does shape then the third fundamental, which is, as a storyteller, shaping how your product is perceived. Because again, that go-to-market and that strategy shapes the messages that you're going to be telling and the positioning that is important or relevant for you to hold. And last but never least is the evangelism. An evangelist, you're an evangelist, but you're enabling others to evangelize on your behalf. That's how you get to scale. In modern marketing, we cannot do it all. We have to have others be the carrier to those stories, those messages, why our product has value. And so we have to make sure the atomic particles of what they can carry and say to their peers or anyone that asks is easy, obvious, and evident.
Yeah, it is ultimately scalable and measurable. Going to delve into just a few things that maybe the people who are deciding that a product marketer needs to fit inside of their org, and they're probably thinking about, well, what would be the key measurements that I would use for this person or for the role to know that it's working. The example that I found very heartening was Zendesk. And you made the point that, yes, they have to follow some of the main acquisition metrics that most of us are following, and that they gave product marketing the opportunity to revamp the entire homepage several times in their life cycle in order to be able to make those metrics move. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about how you mentioned, for example, heart metrics, which I didn't really think of. They sound rather soft, but yet they're extremely important in getting the sense that your market is actually receiving traction with your message. Can you maybe tell us about that?
So metrics as it relates to product marketers are always tricky because they're inevitably shared. They are shared with sales. They are shared with product. They might like product marketing and marketing, pure marketing, outbound, demand generation. They're rarely solely within the purview of product marketing. And as it relates to what is most important to measure, it always depends on what you're trying to get out of the product marketing function. So in the case of Zendesk that you gave the example to, they very famously treated their homepage or their website as a product. And so they iterated on it and they paid very close attention to all of the signals, like how many page views, what's our average time on site, how much time are people spending on resources. And at that point in time, they had double, even relative to HubSpot, who is very famous for inbound, double the number of page views, double the time on site. So really they knew that they were resonating well with their intended audience. Their go-to-market was very much self-serve. Someone comes here, they discover everything that they need on their own. And based on that, they put themselves through the funnel. We don't have to engage them in a sales process. And that's why they spent so much time on on refining their website, because they knew it was their single biggest and most important acquisition vehicle. So the product marketing metrics were very highly overlapping with the team that was building and managing that website and the marketers that were doing a lot of the day-to-day work. And so the metrics very much have to be aligned to what you're good at. That's why the strategy is up there. And so it's fundamental too. What is your go-to-market strategy and who are you trying to reach? Because whether or not you are declared the leader in your category by an analyst might not be the most important thing for you and your chosen go-to-market. It might be the most important thing for someone that's chosen a traditional enterprise direct sales go-to-market. But if you're direct to your user, it might be second, third, fourth. Maybe it's not important right at this point in time. So the metrics should be very based on your chosen go-to-market, your chosen audience, your chosen go-to-market strategy, and then your assets and everything else you have to bring to bear.
when we switch over to that direct sales scenario, because not everybody that we're talking to here is going to have that self-serve approach. But I completely agree that in that case, the experience of buying the product is a product when there are so many other lookalikes that someone can choose from. But in the case of a direct sales approach, the thing that you make clear is that a product marketer, and boy, did I feel this personally, should not just succumb to sales request for more product collateral, because that seems to be where sales is always going to go. And you say that a product marketer, a good one, will give sales what they need, which is not necessarily what they asked for. And this takes some boldness. This takes actually some safety created by the people who've put the product marketing function in place to give them a chance, maybe to press boundaries, maybe to take a few risks. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that and how that's quite important for the product marketing function? Because if they're going to have the resolve to actually change how the end customer is being involved, these are the brass tacks that it sometimes comes to.
Yeah, that is in organizations that have a direct sales force, that partnership with sales is super important. And it needs to be seen as a partnership and not as a service to. Neither one is a service to the other. And what makes that relationship work and what builds that trust is if sales feels like what they're getting has been pressure tested and works for sales. So in the same way that product always tests before it goes out into market, like the best product teams always, the same needs to be true for product marketing teams. If you want the sales team to trust what you're putting out there, make sure the sales team has pressure tested it in a sales environment. So it's not enough to have a sales manager look at the deck and say, yeah, I like it. This will work fine. Because people will say nice things. They'll be nice. What you actually want is like put it out there in the market, get the reactions, listen to what people are saying, see if it's actually achieving its intended outcome, and then work with sales and figure out what did you feel was missing in that meeting that would have gotten to that next call, or what's our next waypoint in the sales journey that this deck needs to get us to, and then you figure it out. And sales will always ask for what they are aware of, which will always be, I'd say, the most obvious. Oh, let's do an event. Let's produce a piece of content. They don't actually, it's just what's familiar. They don't actually know what it needs to say. They don't know the role that it needs to play. That's the marketer's job to figure out, okay, if we're going to create a piece of content, what does it actually need to do? Does it need to support the sales process because of that 4.3 people in that buying committee? They need to go and be able to develop an ROI deck that's all their own? Or is it because we're still trying to convince them that we're number one? The marketer is probably going to have a better work with sales to figure that out. But then you have to develop the right asset that serves that purpose in a singular way. What I see happen in many marketing departments is they create a lot of assets that are halfway spread across multiple things that it's trying to accomplish. So it doesn't do its job well. It doesn't provide facts and data to support right here, right now in the sales process. And each one of those sales process steps and stages needs to be supported uniquely for what is happening at that moment. This is a time for facts and figures and product information. Now is the time to help create ROI in the procurement department and to be an ambassador inside the organization for those that might be skeptics. So understanding that and not trying to spread yourself across, oh, well, here's one asset that can do everything that a lot of people try to do. That's how you're going to get superior results.
Yeah, each individual piece that we make may not seem like a big deal, but we have to keep all those plates spinning. And the more of them that we make, the harder it's going to be. There might be that one at the end that's shaking like a leaf and about to fall. We have to impose some discipline on it using that capital M marketing that we understand. And we can then respectfully but helpfully say to sales, here's what you really need. Here's what I think is going to provide you with what's really going to drive our shared metrics. Martina, I want to thank you so much for your time. If you could tell people how they can find out more about the book or about Costanoa Ventures and other things that you have as pursuits, where can they go?
So if they go to CostanoaVC.com. That's where you'll find me in my venture with my venture hat on. But for those that want to drill down and understand more about product marketing, SVPG.com. And Loved, the book, is available at any of your favorite bookstores or available through Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And that's where you can find more examples, more stories, more about these fundamentals, and lots of tips and tricks. And Glenn alluded to this. I have some one-sheet canvases for the strategic product go-to-market, as well as for a messaging framework that can help you take a lot of what we talked about and actually apply it in your company.
This is one thing I will say about Martina. She is always sharing stuff, and she's able to point out rather scathingly sometimes where product messaging falls flat, where you'll read what somebody's saying about something and you'll say, nope, I still don't get it. And if you have this niggling feeling that that is describing your own product, then I'm going to strongly encourage you to pick up her book or to go to any of the things that she's pointed to so that you can become a better product marketer. Thanks again, Martina.
Thank you so much for having me. Great conversation.
Thanks again to the listener. I hope that this has helped give you better insight to your funnel so that you can make it even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.